but it has truly hit every city of every size across this country. And so we are experiencing that same pain, and we want to stay ahead of the challenge as much as possible, make sure that we're connecting people to the services and getting them quickly off the street. So the last directive I have is on the structural deficit. And this didn't come from the transition advisory team. I didn't have them working on this, but this came from my understanding as a council member. My colleagues know that we've been dealing with this issue for many years, that we have a budget crisis across cities across the state. And as we're developing different opportunities and goals for growing our economy, we would also have to look at the expense side. We have a projected deficit in the city of Everett of $13 million in 2019. And that's a pretty big number. So that means we have some pretty difficult decisions to make on how we're going to make the reductions we need to and continue to deliver high quality services and maintain a high quality life for our residents. So this initiative is going to be in partnership with our city council because they approve our budget. And so our council budget subcommittee will be working in partnership, and they'll be providing oversight and guidance into all the recommendations that we make as a staff team of where we can make reductions. The first area that we're looking at is staff as a whole. About 80% of our budget is staff. So we're looking at those different staff positions and evaluating each position and making sure that there's not a way to reorganize to reduce the team size to make sure that we're delivering the most efficient and effective services as possible. We're looking at travel and training, anything like that that we can reduce costs. Looking at different service levels and service models. So I've asked each department head to take a look at their budget and prioritize what part of their budget is most necessary to what is maybe the least necessary and help advise us, as well as we're taking advice from staff and the community. In 2014, we did a process of really looking at our budget and trying to evaluate and find cost savings. So we're looking at all those recommendations, and we're also asking for new recommendations. So we have a site up on our Everett website now. If you have ideas for cost-saving measures we could take as a city, and we've gotten some great feedback from staff, and I'm sure we'll get great feedback from the community as well of different areas of saving. There's a form that you can use to contact us and make those recommendations, and then I have a team of staff that are looking and reviewing that, and we'll be bringing those recommendations first to me, then they'll go to the council budget subcommittee for recommended changes. We're also looking at expanding our volunteer program. A lot of the work that we do that is around kind of connecting with the community and we could do through maybe an expanded volunteer program. We've gotten some great feedback from, there was a member of my transition advisory team that had some ideas around better utilizing volunteers in one of our departments. It's been suggested by a couple other, and I know local Rotary clubs are looking at ways that you can volunteer and give back to the city and help support some of the work that we're doing. So that's one of the areas we're looking at. And then the last part of it is looking at potential alternative funding models or different service modalities for kind of our big, very expensive departments, such as fire, parks, library, and transit, and different ways that we might be able to provide those services at a different level with different cost centers. And that will all go to council, and certainly before it even goes to that level of decision, we'll find pathways for public input into any of those changes that may come. And all of these are to handle the structural deficit. The structural deficit, it's not just $13 million in 1 year, but it really is, our expenses keep going up at a rate of about 4.5%, but our revenues aren't going up at the same rate. City's revenues come in from property tax, B&O tax, and sales tax. The property tax is capped at 1%. So when one of your tax centers is capped already at 1%, but your expenses, just the cost of doing business, as anyone knows, the cost of running your own businesses goes up by that much every year. It just doesn't keep up with the pace of growth, even if we were, just really growing as an economy. So while we work on growing our revenue through economic development, we have to look at expense reduction in other parts to make sure we're balancing that. So those 5 directives highlight the main priorities of the administration in the coming year. And again, we're going to tackle the budget. We're looking at our safe streets, which is housing and homelessness and opioid addiction. We're looking at community engagement, and that's throughout all of our programs. Economic development, community planning, and then gang and gun violence. So that kind of is the area of primary focus for me and the new administration. And now I'm happy to answer questions. That was a lot of information I just dumped on you.
So it's really not a question, it's more of a statement. So first of all, thanks for being here. I happen to be on the Mukilteo School Board.
Pardon?
I happen to be on the Mukilteo School Board.
Okay, great.
So the 5 initiatives that you talked about, can you just say a little bit about how you're going to overlay the education piece, and education from the K-12 piece? And you have the complex piece of dealing with 2 different school districts. Yeah. And can you just talk a little bit about how that plays in it?
Sure. I don't know if I'll be able to answer your question. You wanted to just know how education plays into the work that we're doing at the city and how we will partner with the 2 different school districts and how that works. You know, we are very fortunate to be served by both Everett School District and Mukilteo School Districts. We have 2 outstanding school districts. So we are very, very fortunate, the city of Everett, that we have those strong K-12 programs. I've met with Marcy Larson as well as Allison Bernelson. I met with them in January. I've also met with Everett Public Schools, and I believe they also served on my transition advisory team. So we've been involved from the get-go now, and I see our schools as necessary partners in all of the directives that I just listed. Especially when you look at public safety, so the gang and gun violence, how we can work in partnership around those issues is going to be key to our success. I think our school districts are doing a good job of keeping kids safe within the walls of the school. Then what happens when they leave school? Where does where do we pass the baton and make sure that the kids are safe out in the community as well, and how can we be working in partnership on that? But they're also outstanding partners in economic development. I think this is one of our least sung strengths. That we have outstanding schools. Employers usually like to locate where there's great schools, where their employees want to live and feel that their kids are going to be well cared for, their employees. And so highlighting our schools, making sure that we are highlighting our school strengths in our promotional materials about the city and the assets that we have to bring, and how can we work in partnership on, you know, when we're looking at working with Boeing and trying to ensure that the next aircraft is built here, the school district is with us at the table as we're having those conversations, which I think is very important. And then how are we partnering with our higher education institutions, making sure there's pathways from K-12 to Everett Community College, to WSU, to the workplace. Thank you.
There was a couple of questions that came in via email. If you want to address those, that would be awesome.
Okay. And this is where the team sent me some information, so it's not poised in question format, so I'll just kind of go through a couple of them, and if I miss one, let me know. Somebody had asked about the library, the South Everett Library branch expansion, if that's happening. Yes, it is. We're looking at value engineering right now, and the reason is that we are in a construction boom, which means from the time that we approved this to move forward to now, the cost of this project has skyrocketed. And so, because of the construction boom that we're in, we have to go back and try to value engineer and see what we can change to make sure that the projects can still be completed within the budget that was presented. And so the team's working on that right now, and we'll present recommendations back to me and the council. But we should still very much be on track. It's maybe just a couple months behind schedule, not significantly behind schedule, but that is what the delay is right now, is the value engineering portion of that. Yes, we have changes in the South Precinct, so staffing changes. Rod Sniffen, captain is Rod Sniffen, and the South Admin Sergeant is Brett Eden, and Zika is now in charge of co-ed, so I don't know if that is just an update for whoever asked that question. I'm sorry, it's Community Outreach and Enforcement Team, so that's the team that's working on the Safe Streets Initiative. Yeah, so he's moved full-time into that role. That's why he's no longer at the South Precinct. So I think neighbors expressed some concerns around pedestrian safety around Holly Drive, and I know that our traffic team looked at that. So if you have specific questions, you can contact Tim Miller, and report those questions to, he's our traffic engineer. But I know that the team is looking at that particular intersection and seeing if there needs to be changes made there. Let's see. Everett long-range plans available. What other questions do you have? Sorry, it's not written in question form, so I can't really tell what the questions. They're just kind of details of what's happening. Yes.
Concerning, so now that commercial flights are going to be available to paint fill, one of my concerns, which are probably a concern of a lot of residents in the area, is the growth of traffic, how traffic is going to increase going. I live on 100, and when our home was built, we were told that there wouldn't be any, the streets would become wider. They would widen the streets. But when I contacted the city, it was kind of on hold. So with commercial flights going, expanding, how, and I know there's usually committees and open forums where residents can go in when these are being, and you can access that, at the city's website. But realistically, how do you think the expansion of going in those flights is going to affect the surrounding area?
So it is my hope that it doesn't have the significant impact that I think that people fear that it will, because in comparison to what we already have out there with Boeing traffic of 30,000 people going to work at pretty close to similar times every day, there's 3 shifts, and so we have a lot of traffic through Boeing already, that the addition of the flights out of Painfield isn't significantly higher than what we are already experiencing. It is slightly higher, but it won't be this massive rush of a bunch of people going at the same time to the same place, which is the challenge that we have with a work center like Boeing, right? Where you have so many cars on the road at the same time. When you've got flights throughout the day, you're going to have that. It's split up, and so it shouldn't be the same impact. But there will be improvements that will have to be made. There will be a public process, and I know that that WashDOT is assembling their project team, and city staff will be a part of that. So I would encourage you to voice your concerns to city staff and let city staff continue to be your voice with WashDOT when they are working on those changes that may happen as it relates to the expansion around Painfield. And did you have a comment or related to this? Or?
Question, I'm good.
Okay, yeah. I don't have more information on that, but Jamie, we can try to get back to you. Yeah.
When you say city staff, is that Jamie? Or what does that mean, contact city staff?
I would, from traffic, so I would contact our traffic engineer for something related to that, and then they'll direct it to the appropriate person that will be working on that issue.
Okay.
But, when it comes to, you're always safe actually bringing anything to Jamie, because, Jamie may not work in every department, but she can get the information from every department, and that's what's so great about having our neighborhood team and our communications team, is that they can really collect that. So if you can't remember who all the right point people are in all the different departments, I don't even know all the right point people in all the different departments. We have team members that can find that information for you and get back to you for the neighborhood.
Thank you.
You talked about the library,
Yes.
the library. My family utilizes the library. Why does the city, and I've only been here for maybe 10 years, but why is there ever a library? Why aren't we part of Snow Isle?
It's a good question, and I think that is one of the things that came up during our 2014 structural deficit action team that was trying to look at ways to save on expenses and different things that we could look at. So that is something that we will look at. That's one of those big buckets of service delivery that we will look at. Our library is very important to us. We want to have a strong library system here serving our community. Do we do that best by having a standalone library? Do we do that best by partnering with Snow Isle? That question still remains to be answered, but we will definitely be looking at that. So it's a great question. Thank you.
Your plan with gaming and drugs, how how with the recent, what news came out with the Snohomish County Prosecutor's Office saying they're no longer going to be prosecuting anything, any type of drugs from 2 grams down because they don't have the resources. So what good do you have, trying to put something in place when you have a prosecutor in the office saying, sorry, but yeah, you can do that, but they had less than 2 grams on them, or they had 2 grams of any illegal drug, but we're just going to slap them in the hand and let them go.
But last October was 3 grams.
Oh, really?
Prior to October was 3 grams, and then dropped down to 1 gram. So I think we're back up to 2. but we have the expedited prosecution. That was my question. How's that going?
And I got another part of that also.
So I asked the chief about this one when I saw that question come in, and we're still evaluating what the impact of that decision is going to be for Everett. It definitely impacts our bottom line because we still have to do this work, and if it's not being prosecuted at the county, will be prosecuted at the municipal level, which is then an additional expense for us. But we are
just need the green light for every other drug user and game person to come back into Snohomish County. Hey, come on in.
But it won't give a green light because we're going to still prosecute them. We're still
Really?
prosecuting the same number of cases. We're still doing the same number of investigations. We're still committed to doing that
Came up
work.
over 700 cases since the previous year, and they can't do anything about it.
We also dropped the prosecution for vehicle crowding from the non-violent felony on down to gross misdemeanor.
So violent.
So if I break into a car,
Yeah. So vehicle prowls that are felonies are still being prosecuted at the county level, but we are still prosecuting the vehicle prowls at the city level as well. So, the challenge that we have is that we have to step up our game to fill that gap that's been then created by the county, right? So we have more work and more expense on a city level, but we are still doing the best that we can to ensure that we can provide that safety to our residents, even if it's an additional expense that our department's incurring. And this is brand new, so we are still trying to determine what this is going to look like. And we're going to be talking to our partners at the county and trying to work out the best solution on this, because it is going to be an additional expense. And we can imagine, you're right, we will see an uptick in that kind of criminal activity if they're not being prosecuted in an unincorporated county and whatnot.
Well, it's real scary because they just followed in suit of the King County prosecutor after doing the exact same thing. So it's like.
And I think all of our local governments are being faced with the same budgetary challenges we are, but we want to make sure that we're not cutting services at the expense of another department, right? So we'll be working in partnership with them. We're still trying to determine what that change means for the city. I don't have a solid answer for you.
Where
yet.
would we be able to find out information on that?
I've been looking online for it like everywhere. So.
With you doing stuff, me personally within the community and also a small business owner,
Yeah.
I really like to know what's going on if I gotta move and I wanna move my business and my family out
Well, we
there.
sure don't want you to move your business and your family, because we want to provide the community that you and your family and your business thrive in. And so, let me reach out to Chief Templeman, and as soon as we kind of got a path of what this new decision that just happened, last week?
Yeah.
So this brand new decision that came our way, what that means for us and what that could mean for you, and we'll get back to you. Yeah, so, Jamie, you got it? What else? Yes? So they did some of that work. Impact study of what the noise around Paintfield does for that neighborhood. Thank you for asking for that. They did some of that work way back when we were working to establish commercial air, and they certainly determined at that time that is minimal because of what the work that's already happening out of Boeing, the number of flights that are already leaving there throughout the day that we're kind of unaware of, that are just happening out of Boeing, that it should be a minimal impact. But then there's standards that we have to abide by, that every airport, every kind of airport impact area has to abide by those standards. So our new airfield, county's airfield will be abiding by those standards. that hopefully will minimize the impact to the local neighboring areas. But that work and that study was done early on, long before we got to this point. Yes,
Another question I have for you.
I love engaged citizens.
Because this is just pretty much right up the street from me off, on 100. And I just don't understand it. How can the city not inform us as taxpayers and homeowners and whoever in the area and put in a methadone injection area within a 10-minute walk of 3 schools?
Okay, so question about methadone injection areas, which is a little, I'll correct you on your phrasing there on one thing. There's a difference between a safe injection site and a methadone clinic. So there's 2 different things. I just want to make sure that we understand, because people have confused the 2. So number 1, the city of Everett does not allow safe injection sites according to our current codes. So there are no authorized safe injection sites within the city of Everett. And that is the way it is currently zoned.
So methadone is considered
No.
safe?
Is
Nope.
that methadone clinic still open? I heard it closed.
Hold on.
So that's a safe
Let her
injection
answer.
site.
No, you can still get.
Then there are methadone clinics, and methadone are medication-assisted treatment for folks that are struggling with heroin addiction. We have a methadone clinic here in Everett on 100th and Evergreen Way. And as there's another clinic that is looking to locate in the city, it was brought to the Planning Commission to look at whether we should expand our code that currently allows for 1 methadone clinic, and if we should expand our code. And when they looked at whether or not we should expand the code to allow for a 2nd methadone clinic, our legal team discovered that we are out of compliance with federal law, because legally any type of treatment facility those individuals have a right to getting treatment there through the Americans with Disabilities Act. They have a right to get treatment and the services that they need. So we cannot treat any type of clinic, whether it is a methadone clinic or a foot center or an emergency room, cannot be treated differently. They all are clinics in the law.
But
So-
how can it be that close to a school?
Hold on. So we have to change our code to allow for methadone clinics, because they're just like any other clinic. So we have to allow for clinics. So that code has to be changed, according to the Planning Commission's recommendation. So now it's come back to the City Council, and the City Council is looking at this going, okay, well, we need to comply with the law to make sure that we will not face a lawsuit from there, to make sure that we are ADA compliant, and we're treating all clinics the same. But do we need to look at clinics in certain areas and say, is that a good location for a clinic, or is it not a good location for a clinic? And usually that's because the way your zones work is that you want like businesses together, right? You want, businesses that are kind of supporting each other next to each other. You don't want businesses that don't make any sense all lined up together.
Is that why I have 3 marijuana shops within 500 feet of each other over on 99?
So that is because they are with unincorporated Snohomish County. So those multiple marijuana shops are in unincorporated Snohomish County. They may have an Everett address, but they are in unincorporated Snohomish County, which is different rules and regulations than we have in the city of Everett. So in the city, we have regulations regulating our marijuana shops that say you have to be a certain distance from each other, and you can't be close to schools, and you can't be here. But those regulations are different when you get outside of the city limits. And so the county has different regulations, and they're much more lenient than what we have in the city.
Is there a way to take it?
So the planning department is the one that is tackling this issue around marijuana shops. They are the ones that made the initial recommendations to council, and now council is going to be looking at this and looking at how we can get in compliance with state law, and also take into account appropriate locations for clinics in general. I would encourage you to share your comments and concerns with the city council, because they're the ones that are looking at this right now. And whether location proximity to schools is something they can consider, will have to be brought up.
Yeah, I mean, this therapeutic health services, they have some really nice programs, I gotta say. But, when it comes down to that, and then I see postings of people going, oh, this is a great place, I give it 5 stars. I've been going to this place feeding my methadone for the last 10 years. So.
Okay, yeah, so I encourage you to share with council your thoughts, and, yes.
So, in the past week, I've had 2 really great opportunities to attend events in Everett. So that includes the Resilience Conference that happened, where over 500 community members, educators, people working in leaders coming together to think about ACEs, adverse childhood experiences, and trauma-informed practices. So that was really great. And then on Saturday, there was the Equity in Education Conference that was held at Mariner High School. So, you know, as a community member, I understand those things are really trying to get at the root causes of the things that we experience in our community. And as community members, we could go as deep and far with that as much as we want. Like with every problem, how far are we going to peel that onion to think about those issues? So my question for you, as you are working with teams and you have leaders and you're engaging with the community, how much of that is like being discussed or being encouraged to like look at those things at a deeper level? Because we can slap Band-Aids on things. All we want is just going to bleed out all over, and it's going to bleed out with their children. Yeah. And you know, I love this community. I think David's murder was just horrific, and that's what I want to get at. Yeah. So these things don't bleed out. So I guess for, you know, as a leader, and you know, you have that background with the youth. Like, how much are you engaging leadership around those things? So we have a equity lens when we're looking at our problems in our community, and it's not us versus them. It's not those people. They're our people. They're living in our community, and these are our families. These are our children who are going through these things. And so I just want to know, from a leadership position, like how much are you having those courageous conversations